All right, turn your Bibles, if you would, please, to 1 Peter chapter 1. The title of this message this morning is, What is to Follow? What's to follow? We're going to continue looking at Peter here for just the next few moments. Last week we talked about the trial of our faith, verse 7 of 1 Peter chapter 1. Verse 6, he said, Wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. They believed Christ was coming back in their lifetime. They did not think that they were ever going to see death, that Jesus was going to come back, was going to set up his kingdom and bring eternal salvation and hope for all of mankind. Verse 8, In whom having not seen ye love, in whom though now ye see him not, yet believing ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls, of which salvation the prophets have inquired and searched diligently, who prophesied of the grace that should come unto you, searching what or what manner of time the Spirit of Christ which was in them did signify, when it testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ and the glory that should follow. And that's what I want to talk about here just for the next few moments. Now, first of all, just to kind of kick it back to last week for a moment, folks, understand this, that when it comes to a person's behavior, what's most important about what a person does, or when a person does something, some behavior, some act, what's most important isn't the behavior itself. What's more important than the behavior itself is when a person does that behavior or does that thing. The timing of behavior many times is far more important than the behavior itself. Many people throughout history have done marvelous things, miraculous things. Athletes have done things that defy the human body's ability to accomplish it. People in finances, people in politics, people in war have accomplished things that seemingly defy the odds, all the odds against them. But what separates the average person or the norm that society sets for one, it's not so much the behavior itself, but it's when that behavior is performed. In the world of competition that I live in, for an example, the world's greatest golfer of all times is Jack Nicklaus, and then you have Tiger Woods. But if you look at their statistics, if you look at Tom Brady, best quarterback to ever play professional football. If you look at his statistics, you look at all these guys that superseded everyone else. If you look at their statistics, they're all about the same. Jack Nicklaus didn't hit any more putts, make any more putts than anybody else that was average on the tour. Tiger Woods, same thing. He doesn't hit the ball any further really than those who hit it the farthest. Tom Brady's passing quarterback statistics, many of them are average amongst everybody else's quarterbacks who ever played in the NFL. But what separates them from everyone else is doing those same behaviors when the most pressure and the most stress was upon them to perform. They were able to perform those behaviors when everyone else couldn't. And you see, that's just like what Peter's talking about here. When we go through the fire, we go through trials, we all, Christians, we walk with God, we go to church, we do these things, and And it's easy to be Christian. It's easy to shout glory, hallelujah. It's easy to have joy unspeakable and full of glory. Okay? It's easy to have those things when everything's going good or normal or everything's the way that it's supposed to be. But all of a sudden, upset the apple cart. All of a sudden, let's now go through the fire. Let's now go through some serious temptations. Let's now experience some stress that we've never had before. Can we still have that same faith? Can we still have that same joy? Can we still have that same joy unspeakable and full of glory type of spirit about us? If we can, then we're amongst the mighty. If we can, then we'll be prepared for the glory that shall follow. If we can't, then we go back to start and we try to begin all over again to try to learn those lessons that hopefully will get us to that place to where when the pressure's on, when we're going through the fire, when we find ourselves under stress, when we find ourselves under an assault of life, an assault of just life, financial assault, social assault, whatever it might be, assault from the enemy, can we still maintain a certain posture about our faithfulness in the things of God? So in verse 8, whom thou not see, you love, in whom though now you see him not, yet you still believe. You rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. Peter is talking about that for those people. Even when we're going through the fire, we still maintain that. You see, when everything else is going bad, can we still perform those behaviors when other people seem to falter? Now, the first characteristic I want to talk about this morning concerning keeping that joy unspeakable and full of glory faith and joy and hope about our lives when we're going through a fire, when we're being tested. The first thing is this, folks. We must get our eyes off ourselves. Get our eyes off of ourselves. You see, let's look at Peter just for a second. You see, this Peter could do, once he became expendable. Now listen to me. Peter could now do this and write this once he allowed himself and came to a commitment of being expendable for something greater than himself. Christian people, church, listen to me. Okay? We don't know, we won't really fully understand the fruition of joy unspeakable and full of glory, faith and hope and peace in the midst of trial and temptation, in the midst of going through the fire, until we've committed ourselves in being expendable for something that's bigger than ourselves. Right. If all we do is just look at me and mine, if what I'm mainly concerned about is the world meeting my needs, is the government meeting my needs, is my retirement the way that it's supposed to be, am I going to have all the insurance that I'm supposed to have, is God fair to me, is the church fair to me, does the pastor preach in such a way it makes me feel good about myself, all these things coming my way, if that's all that there is, listen folks, there's going to come a time when all of that's going to be tested. Okay? If a person enters a circumstance with a bad attitude, something's going to happen within that circumstance to reveal that bad attitude. And most of the time, it's not going to be a good thing. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be very daunting to realize that maybe there's something about what's going on inside of me that shouldn't be there. You see, Peter took his eyes off of himself when he was willing to be expendable for something greater than himself. You see? And here's what he was willing to be expendable for. The greater was the gospel in somebody else's life. The gospel in other people's lives. Folks, it is crucial that all of us, we're responsible in one way or another for the gospel in somebody else's life. That's why I encourage you. Maybe your children won't come to the communion service Wednesday before Thanksgiving. But go pick up your grandchildren and bring them to church. If your children won't come on your own, then bring your grandchildren. Go get your grandchildren and bring them to church. Our children and our grandchildren are going to be here Wednesday night. I encourage you, folks. You see, that's something bigger than ourselves. And then we take it beyond our own families to somebody else, to some other person, to some other people. You see, that's embracing the nature that I'm not going to look just upon my own self, but I'm going to look upon the affairs of others. And that means that something about my life, I need to be committed to something that's bigger than me. And that means investing myself into someone else.
Amen.
That's what that means. I encourage you. Maybe there's somebody in your life, a brother, a sister, a friend, a cousin, mom and dad, whoever, aunt or uncle, whoever, okay, neighbor, co-worker, somebody that you know. Somebody out there, folks, I'm encouraging you this morning. Somebody out there, the Lord is preparing, that if we'll just have the courage to invite them to church or to go get them. Let me ask you this question for just a moment. How far are we as Christian people willing to drive to go minister to somebody else? How far? I have people all through the ministry. Pastor Charlie, you can relate to this. If it takes longer than 15 or 20 minutes to get to church, well then, that's just kind of too far. And I don't really like any of the churches that are closer than that, so, I just don't go. How far are we willing to expend ourselves for something that's bigger than ourselves? How far am I willing to drive to pick somebody up and to bring them to church and then to take them back home? Folks, I grew up in this. I remember Dad pastoring in Moscow, in the early 60s. And I remember taking old people, when I say old, I mean, now we're one of those, you know what I'm saying? But when you're 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9-year-old, if you're over 20, you're really old, But I remember they'd walk with canes, and some of them even mostly blind, and half of them, couldn't hear. And after church, Sunday morning, Sunday night, whenever, we get in the car and we drive out into the country, somewhere out there around Moscow, and we drop them off, and then we go back home, and then we'd go the next church time, we'd go out there and we'd pick them up. And that's how I grew up. So when I became an adult, so when I went into ministry, when I went into coaching, those type of things, I was committed. If an athlete couldn't get to practice, I would drive however far it took for me to drive to pick him up, to bring him to practice, have practice, take him home. I'd drive however far I needed to drive to pick up this young boy and bring him in so he could lift weights, so he could work out in the summertime. So he'd work out. I'd even take him to my house. I'd feed him food, do whatever, and then I'd take him back home, drop him off, and said, I'll see you tomorrow. We'll do the same thing again tomorrow. Why? Because it's bigger than me. It's not just about me. I'm committed to something that's bigger than me. I'm willing to be expendable. I'm willing to expend my time. I'm willing to expend my gas. I'm willing to expend the finances that it takes to put into the gas tank. I wake up in the morning, 6 o'clock, 6:30. I go pick up young people, bring them to the weight room so we could work out. Bring them to the church, my first youth pastor position. I built a weight room in the first church where we were youth pastors. And I developed a weightlifting program for the kids and athletes that were in the school, because in those days, high schools didn't have weight rooms. And so I made my own. And so 6:30, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I go pick up these kids, bring them to church, bring them to a back room in the church. We'd work out, we'd lift weights, I'd talk to them about the Lord, I'd take them to school. They'd go to school. When school was over, the bus would take them back home, and tomorrow morning we'd do it all over again. Why? Because I'm committed to something that's bigger than me. We're committed to something that's bigger than ourselves, you see, and that's Peter. To have joy unspeakable and full of glory means I got to get my eyes off of myself, and I got to put my eyes upon something that's bigger than I am. And that means that I'm willing to be expendable for whatever it takes. I'm willing to be expendable. There's a cause in my life that's beyond me. And folks, I'm here to tell you, here are the holidays. People are in a place where they're willing to give, and that we receive, and there's kind of a jovial type of attitude and type of thing. I just encourage you, minister to somebody. Invite somebody to come to church. Tell them that you'll even bring them. You'll go pick them up, however far it is. If it's next door or 3-4 miles away, how much are we willing to be expendable for a cause bigger than ourselves? Or am I willing to just go through the status quo because I have all that I need?